we thought we should bring you back to the parliamentary precinct because we've been able to spot the Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, kind enough to give us a word ahead of this all-important event set to kick off in earnest from about 7 o'clock. Minister, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's great to see you. Let's begin perhaps with some of the more important issues dominating national discourse in some ways. You must have seen the tweet from the Secretary of State of the US most recently. His posture towards South Africa really, if you like, doubling down on Donald Trump's sentiments. Your response as the spokesperson of government?
Minister of International Relations, Minister Lamula, has issued a statement to note that Secretary of State Rubio is not going to attend the G20 ministerial that's taking place on the 20th of February, and he has raised concerns about the Expropriation Act, and we have clarified as government that it's a serious misinformation in terms of what the Expropriation Act is. In fact, South Africans are talking about it. The US has similar law that is called the Eminent Domain law that's in place, and our Expropriation Act, it's about focusing on fast-tracking economic growth, which is a pillar of the 7th administration, by unlocking part of the key reforms. Remember, part of the developments was stuck because land was not released on time, and the Land Expropriation Act gives effect to that, to say for public good and public interest and public purpose, you can then expropriate land for that development to take place. The US and other jurisdictions do the same, so there's nothing new there. And then he also complains about our focus on climate change. Climate change is important for South Africa, for Africa in general, because of the impact it's having on us. But our focus, our presidency of the G20 is not only focused on climate change. We are talking about the reforms of global institutions for a just cause for the world, like the Security Council of the UN, the financing institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank. So it's important for us. But South Africa is ready to host the ministers and diplomats on the 20th of February who are willing to engage on how do we work together to resolve these important challenges that confront our world. So we are on that one.
If you ask me, I think the presidency and government at whole has been at pains to explain the inaccuracy, quite frankly. What is interesting to see is that it doesn't seem that the US is interested in that kind of explanation, which is raising serious concerns about, I suppose, the relationship between the two countries and whether or not we're at a stage where South Africa's planning, anticipating a G20 without any US involvement.
The G20 is a forum for global leaders, and they are members of the G20, set members. We can't dictate who attends, who doesn't attend. As it relates to our relationship with the US, we've always maintained during the 6th administration, we continue to maintain even now, that we continue to engage with the US as a trading partner, as an equal. And what's interesting is that from last week, you had a clarity. Remember, you used to think we are dependent on US aid in particular, and we say only 17% of PEFA funding it comes through, and it doesn't. Government funds 90% of the ARV acquisition.
It's still a big portion, Minister. Only 17%.
But we fund the 90% of the acquisition of ARVs. The 10% is the global fund that funds that, and the 17% is not directly into government programs. It's mostly in the NGOs, and it's not about medication. That's why we said people must go and get. It's about the staff. So we need to close that gap, and we will close the gap. We have committed ourselves to that. You have also bemoaned in the previous administration, both the 6th administration in South Africa and also the Biden administration, to say AGOA is going to be removed. We got renewed. And even if they review, majority, the racist party, AfriForum, that is pushing for removal of AGOA, is literally cutting its own nose to spike its own face, because the majority of the farmers in AGOA, if not all, are white South Africans. And as government, we have said we are a government for all. That's why we promote the interests of all South Africans. Whether it's black business or whether it's white business, we promote that. Yeah. And that's the reality of our relationship. And in any other, we are a sovereign state, we'll have policy positions, like the US will have their own policy positions. There's always room to engage.
As a government official, Minister, I'm sure you'll agree that optics matter. Those are very important. And I know they are the tenets of diplomacy and making sure that, certain lines aren't drawn. But there has been let's call it a sentiment out there that the current or the comments being made by the Trump administration through these different tweets aren't landing well for people who are worried about our own standing our own ability to stand our ground and respond appropriately to what's being said. So frankly, the question is, are you worried at all about people who are saying that Cyril Ramaphosa is coming across as weak if we don't respond in a particular way to some of what's coming out of Washington?
Not really. As the media, you've maintained that line. Actually, since the tweet around the Expropriation Act and all sorts of accusation, misinformation that have been peddled, South Africans have been more united. People are calling out the misinformation. It's more white South Africans than anybody else. So that on its own has united this country. And I give us as South Africans like a metaphor of a tea bag. You want to see how strong we are? Put us in hot water, we come together. And one thing, we may have our challenges as a family, but we're committed to resolve those challenges within ourselves. When an external party enters, that's when you see South Africans saying, back off, we've got this on our own. And that's what has made us a nation. 30 years, we're still standing. We have not collapsed. We had faced significant challenges, but we have come through as a nation. And that's what makes us stronger. Of course, in the diplomatic world, there will always be differences, but there's always room for engagement. That's why it's called diplomacy.
Right. The door, I imagine, still very much open to speaking to U.S. officials.
They are our largest, greatest trading partner. They can't avoid us, we can't avoid them, so we have to engage, we continue to engage. And we find each other on certain things, we'll differ on certain things, we maintain our constitutional positions and our sovereignty as a nation, and that's what we've done. And you have speculated the worst and we've come out the best. So it's up to you.
All right. Another major issue, Minister, that we can't avoid is what's taking place in Eastern DRC. There was commentary in Parliament from the SANDF Army Chief that the bodies of our fallen soldiers would be back in the country by now. Still so many unanswered questions. I'm sure you must have received a briefing about this. What are you able to tell us?
We're leaving the operational matters to the military council to deal with the matters. We've been engaging with the families. They've been kept up to date in terms of that. You are aware of the double troika meeting that is taking place over the weekend, the SADC and the East Africa Commission Summit. We are, as South Africa, we are in that. As SADC, we have resolved on a ceasefire to say we must uphold the ceasefire that was initiated by President Lorenzo of Angola and which was breached. And we are saying all of us must go back. And the resolution of SADC says state actors and non-state actors, we must all come to the table so that we can have a lasting ceasefire and find peace. As South Africa and SADC, we've maintained that the solution to the Eastern DRC problems are always going to be found through a political solution. The military intervention is a stopgap measure to protect lives of the people and to protect the sovereignty. But paramount to our work is the political solution to that problem so that they can be coexistent. So we're looking forward to participating. We've been invited, South Africa, part of the troop contributing countries, to participate in the SADC East Africa Summit taking place this weekend.
It's interesting you speak about the families being updated this very morning. I think it was a Sowetan speaking about families who are still very much in the dark, but I suppose we'll have that discussion at another time. As you and I speak, do we know where the remains of our fallen soldiers are? Are they in the country?
We know where the remains are. Unfortunately, because it's an operational matter, I can't tell you as of now. Because
but are they in the country?
They were moving back. They were trying to get them in the country. So I can't tell you. It's an operational matter. It's difficult for me to say they are in the country. It's quite operational. They will come into the country, and the families will bury their dead, and as the country will mourn our dead.
All right, Minister in the Presidency, thanks very much indeed. This is the time we have in just a moment, but okay, let me just squeeze in a quick question about the State of the Nation address, which is why we are here. A lot of anticipation, a growing list of expectations from a whole host of people. I suppose the question for the Minister of the Presidency is how confident you are that the President will be able to balance the sometimes conflicting interests within the Government of National Unity, which we've seen play out even in the last 2 weeks.
I think you hype a lot of public engagements that are not taking place within the 7th administration.
That's all we know, Minister. I can only speak about what's happening in the public.
No, we gave you a briefing last week. We had ministers giving you a briefing of the discussions that were taking place at the Lekgotla and the proposals coming from the different clusters. We went to the Lekgotla with the proposals from the clusters. We agreed on what are the primary tasks that the President will announce later. We have agreed on the focus area, and we are still maintaining our 3 priorities of inclusive inclusive growth, economic growth, which creates jobs, a capable state, and also dealing with the poverty and the high cost of living in the country, and to realize that there's a step change that is required in terms of work that is done to create jobs, in terms of special focus on job creation, but in partnership with business and labor, but also on the infrastructure development. You realize the Minister of Finance, when announcing the medium-term budget policy statement, alluded to some of the reforms that are coming in to unlock the release of funding of infrastructure in the country that will come through, and also the budget will also touch on that, so that we can commit to that. Also in terms of building the capacity of the state, so that we can execute, including the drive on digital transformation. But also what's important is how, as government, the 7th administration from the 6th administration, we have lobbied and mobilized South Africans, the government and business partnership and labor partnership to come together so that we can work for the common good of the country. And the president is going to make those pronouncements.